This is the narrated PowerPoint on writing the letter of application. Here's the assignment. I discussed it in more detail on the resume narrated PowerPoint. I'm not going to repeat it here. If you didn't watch that one, you can pick it up when you watch it. So the job application letter is crucial. Of course, there's always been controversy about some businesses require the job application letter, some don't. And recently I looked at a set of application letters from one of my classes, and what I saw was that about half of the jobs they were applying to required a application letter, and about half didn't. Sometimes they're called cover letters too as well. It's the same thing. A cover letter is a more general term that refers to any letter that accompanies another document. An application letter is more specific. But anyway, the point is that everybody gets to do an application letter, and the reason we're doing that is, well, you might fall into the category of having a job that you're applying for that requires one, but also it's good practice, especially for the job interview. It helps you to start articulating your experience. That is, getting you used to talking about the things that you've done in your classes and on the jobs that you've had that will make you a superior candidate. Certainly, if you're required to write a letter and it's ineffective, if it's filled with grammatical errors, for example, it looks unprofessional, the reader might not bother to read the resume. Sometimes the application letter and the resume, an analogy is drawn with a beauty contest, and some have said that the resume is like the swimsuit portion, and the letter is like the part at the end where the different candidates are given a question to answer that reveals something of their character. And certainly you reveal your character in your job application letter. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. And the resume is more like facts and figures about your life. So you don't want to treat it as a note. It should be about one full page. It has to be error-free. So proofread, proofread, proofread. You've got a piece of paper here, and so what you should do is you should fill it up. Even if we're talking about something that's electronic, and sometimes the letter of application takes the shape of being uploaded with a resume to a job application, and it's entirely electronic, but they still have you writing the letter. And of course, you want it to look like any type of business letter. Your book has plenty of examples, 1-inch margins all the way around. All words in the salutation, the first letter in each word in the salutation should be capitalized. In the closing, you just capitalize the first letter in the first word. So if you had sincerely yours, you would just capitalize the S in sincerely. So you're going to have the inside address, and you're going to have the salutation. And with the salutation, should you put "Dear Sir"? Well, what if it happens to be a woman who opens it, and what if she's offended by the fact that you put "Dear Sir"? So how about if you're supposed to write your letter to K. Smith? How do you do that? Do you write it "Dear Mr. Smith"? Do you write it "Dear Mrs. Smith"? Do you write "Dear Ms. Smith"? Do you write "Dear Mr. or Ms. Smith"? That would be silly. What do you do? How about just simply "Dear K. Smith"? That's the way you've been told to address it. If you don't know the gender of the person that you're writing to, then use "to whom it may concern." In terms of content, remember that you're writing a sales document. You're trying to sell them on the idea of inviting you in for an interview and eventually to offer you a job. and you want more than one job offer, so that you have a choice. It should not be an expanded resume. They don't need to read your resume again. The resume should be more of a springboard that you explore in the application letter. That is, you've listed jobs and that you've had, and you've listed your basic duties that you had at those jobs. Well, you write in the letter, you write about a specific project that you worked on, a problem that you solved. That's going to be a theme throughout the letter. In the introduction, you want to establish the tone and capture attention. A good way to do that is to get to the point of what you're writing about in the first sentence. You want to brag, and we talked about in the resume about not using a lot, not bragging in a sense in terms of using a lot of complimenting yourself by listing different characteristics that you claim to have. What you're able to do in the letter is to demonstrate that. And of course, bragging also means just having a good positive attitude towards yourself and your application and your capabilities. For example, I once had a friend who was getting a degree in engineering, and his wife, who was teaching where I was, showed me a letter he had written. And his letter had a sentence on it that said something like, "Oh, I know that I am just a recent college graduate with no real work experience, but I'll work really, really hard." I said, "Well, that's not good. He needs to present himself in a more positive light." And she got angry. She said, "Oh, he's got to find a job. We're running out of money." I said, "Well, it's his application, your life, and so forth." Well, you got a job with that letter, but the type of place, and it was an engineering job, but it didn't pay very well. And they expect him to come in and work 12-hour days, Monday through Friday. And to come in for an 8-hour day on Saturday, and then, come in Sunday afternoon, say from 1 to 5 or so. And when they laid him off, they didn't tell him until his last day. And that was the day at the end of the workday, they told him to pack a box and go. So there was really no reflection on him. It was more a reflection on the company, but he presented himself in the light of someone who really was less desirable than he could have. You are a recent college graduate, and that does separate you from an awful lot of other people who don't have that experience. Dropping names is also another term that has what we refer to as a negative connotation. That is that we associate negative ideas with a name dropper. That's someone who tries to impress people with who he or she knows. But with the job interview, if somebody told you about the job, then that works for the company, for example, and it's a good idea to let them know. Or if somebody else told you about the job, like a professor or someone like that, let them know how you found out about the job or how you found out about the company. They like to know how their advertising is working. Or if you just saw an ad somewhere on Monster or even in a newspaper, be sure to let them know how you found out about the job in the introduction. And you forecast the rest of the letter through the tone and by providing transition to the next paragraph, which for most of you will be your education. Now, on your resume, up at the top, after the identifying information, if you feel what is most impressive about your application is your education, that will be the case for most of you, then that's what you discuss, or that's what you have next on the resume. Some people, especially people who have more work experience, might feel that their work experience is more impressive, so that's the second item on the resume. Whatever the second item is, whether it's your education or your work experience, that should be the topic of the second paragraph of your letter. So you see, you're kind of using your resume as a guide for how the letter is written, but still you want to go beyond it. You don't want to simply write up your resume in complete sentences. You want to discuss your related coursework. What courses have you taken that you think your reader, your prospective employer might be interested in knowing that you've taken? And sometimes students get jobs based upon coursework that they've done because they don't have anybody at that particular job who knows how to use a particular piece of software or understands a particular concept that perhaps you've been introduced to and perhaps have even mastered. You want to focus on problem solving. So on the resume, of course, you may have listed a course that you think a prospective employer would be interested in knowing that you have taken. And in the letter, what you do is you write about a project that you did in that course. And you write about the problems that you encountered. And tell your reader what you did to solve them. The next paragraph is going to be employment. Again, you want to use specific examples, as we've been saying. This is the question that they want the answer to. What have you learned about working hard and working with others as a team member? And again, your focus should be on problem solving. In the conclusion, you're trying to stimulate action. So you might say something like, you might ask a question. When might we meet to discuss my qualifications for a job? Or I'll be in Atlanta next Thursday. Can we schedule an appointment to discuss my qualifications? Nothing wrong, actually, with ending a letter like this with a question. Because psychologically, the way that works, somebody asks you a question, you answer it, right? It's a good idea to refer to your resume. It could be that perhaps they printed, even if you submitted it electronically, that they printed it out, your resume and your application letter, and they've gotten separated. So it's a good idea to make a reference to your resume, request an interview we talked about. It's a good idea to repeat your contact information, again, in case the resume and the letter have gotten separated. Nothing wrong with that. Okay, so that's it for the letter. Coming up next will be interviewing for a job.